In the dark heart of Gotham, where corruption and pain intertwine, a tormented genius emerges from the shadows. Edward Nashton, the Riddler, transforms his anguish into deadly puzzles, challenging the city to confront its darkest secrets. In his quest for recognition and connection, he becomes both the villain and the victim of his own tragic story. Edward's story begins long before he became one of the most intriguing villains in Batman's rogues gallery. His childhood was marked by a lack of love and neglect, factors that shaped his psyche and turned him into a tormented individual. Edward grew up in a home where indifference was the norm. His parents, immersed in their own frustrations and problems, never bothered to offer the affection and support a child needs. Loneliness became his constant companion, and the boy found himself trapped in a world where there was no space for his emotions. He became a spectator of his own life, a silent observer of the human interactions around him, always longing to be a part of them, but never succeeding. This dysfunctional family environment fostered a deep sense of inadequacy and abandonment in Edward. He learned to emotionally defend himself, building walls around him, isolating himself in a fantasy world where his intelligence and creativity could shine. Puzzles and riddles began to take shape in his mind, functioning as a way to escape the oppressive reality in which he lived. These mental games became not only a way to cope with his pain, but also a reflection of his desire to be seen and recognized. As the years passed, the absence of validation and love transformed Edward into a true genius of chaos. Instead of succumbing to despair, he became obsessed with finding meaning in his life. Riddles became his form of expression, a way to communicate his pain and frustration to the world. Thus, the Riddler was born, a character who would not only challenge Batman, but also become a symbol of his own internal struggle. The riddles created by the Riddler are more than simple challenges. They are manifestations of his tortured psyche. Each riddle he creates is a desperate cry for attention and recognition, and attempts to make people see what he sees. Edward is not just seeking to expose Gotham's corruption, he wants to be heard, wants his voice to echo within the walls of the city that has ignored him. In his mind, each puzzle is a form of art, a reflection of his pain, and an opportunity to connect with the world. The act of creating riddles becomes a way to turn his pain into something tangible and understandable. He believes that by challenging Gotham's authorities and citizens, he is not only revealing hidden truths, but also placing himself in a position of power. Edward's loneliness is palpable, and he sees himself as an outsider, someone who has never belonged anywhere. This fuels his obsession with authority figures like Batman. To him, the hero is both a rival and an icon to be admired. His distorted mind makes him view Batman not only as an opponent, but as a representation of everything he wishes to be: powerful, respected, and above all, heard. The riddles become a form of control in a world that has always left him powerless. By manipulating fear and uncertainty, Edward finds a way to assert his existence. He uses intelligence as armor, protecting himself from the emotional wounds he carries. Each riddle he creates is a piece of a larger puzzle, an attempt to assert himself in a world that has always rejected him. As Edward delves deeper into his journey as the Riddler, loneliness becomes a constant presence in his life. He observes the human interactions around him, feeling increasingly alienated. This social exclusion leads him to develop a desperate need for connection. He wants people to see beyond his riddles and recognize the pain he carries. This search for connection becomes a driving force behind his actions. Edward's desire for recognition intensifies as he begins to see Batman as a projection of his own aspirations. He does not see the vigilante merely as an enemy, but as a figure that represents everything he has never been: a hero, someone who fights for justice and is respected by society. This distorted admiration for the figure of Batman turns into an obsession, and Edward comes to believe that, in order to be recognized, he must challenge the hero in a deadly game. The Riddler manipulates his riddles as a form of connection. By creating puzzles that challenge Batman, he seeks not only to defeat him, but also to establish a silent dialogue. Each riddle is an attempt to communicate, to make Batman see beyond the mask he wears. Edward longs for recognition he has never had, and believes that by exposing Gotham's secrets, he will finally be heard. However, this search for connection is fraught with frustration. Edward realizes that even in his moments of triumph, loneliness persists. The city he tries to save does not see his worth, and this reality consumes him. The Riddler becomes a reflection of his own pain, a character who fights against a system that seems to ignore him entirely. The psychopathic traits that emerge in Edward are, in many ways, a response to the traumas of his childhood. Manipulation becomes a tool he uses to turn his pain into power. He delights in causing fear and confusion, using his riddles to provoke Gotham's citizens and authorities. Each message he sends is laden with bitter irony. He wants people to feel the same helplessness he has felt throughout his life. Edward sees himself as a maestro, orchestrating a symphony of chaos while observing the city react to his challenges. He believes that by exposing Gotham's darkest secrets, he is enacting a form of justice. However, this distorted view of morality leads him down a dark path where the line between right and wrong becomes increasingly blurred. His ability to manipulate others' emotions is a reflection of his own unresolved pain. Edward understands human weaknesses, but feels no genuine empathy. He exploits the vulnerabilities of his victims, turning their suffering into a form of personal validation. This lack of empathy is characteristic of individuals with psychopathic traits, who often seek to manipulate and control those around them to satisfy their emotional needs. As the Riddler advances in his quest for control, he becomes increasingly obsessed with the idea that his actions are just and necessary. He sees himself as a paladin of truth, a hero in his own distorted narrative. This self-perception leads him to a state of denial, where he ignores the consequences of his actions and the pain he causes to others. Edward's disillusionment intensifies as he becomes more aware of human fallibility. He observes Gotham, a city he believes to be irreparably broken. This feeds his anger and frustration, leading him to believe that the only way to bring change is through chaos. His actions become a form of protest, an attempt to wake the city up to the reality of its corruption. However, this distorted view of justice leads him down a dark path where he battles his own demons. Edward finds himself trapped in a cycle of self-destruction where his violent and manipulative actions become increasingly extreme. He refuses to see the reality of his actions, convinced that he is doing what is right, even when it means causing pain to innocents. Edward's internal struggle is palpable. He longs for connection, yet at the same time, he distances himself more and more from people. His riddles, which should serve as a form of dialogue, become a barrier that isolates him even further. He sees himself as a martyr for his own cause, believing that his actions, no matter how dark, are justified. Loneliness becomes a prison, and the battle between his need for control and his desire for connection consumes him. Edward faces an abyss where his choices push him further away from any possibility of redemption. This internal struggle culminates in a growing despair, where he must confront not only Batman, but also himself. The climax of the film brings a confrontation between Batman and the Riddler that is not only physical but psychological. Edward believes that by exposing Gotham's secrets, he is revealing the truth to Batman, challenging him to see beyond the mask he wears. He longs for a validation he can never have, and this search becomes the engine of his obsession. When Batman finally confronts the Riddler, the tension between them is palpable. Edward, in his distorted mind, believes that his riddles are an invitation for Batman to join him in his fight against corruption. He sees the vigilante as an equal, someone who can understand his pain and struggle. This distorted view of Batman as a potential ally intensifies the tragic nature of his journey. The moment the Riddler is finally captured is a turning point. Edward laughs, not out of joy, but from deep frustration. To him, the real defeat is not being imprisoned, but failing to get his messages understood. He continues to believe that his actions were justified and that, somehow, he is the true hero of the story. The Riddler's capture is a moment of revelation. In his cell, he laughs, not because he has won, but because the truth he so desperately sought remains hidden. He feels misunderstood, a martyr for his own cause. At that moment, he realizes that, even in his defeat, His legacy of riddles and challenges will continue to resonate in Gotham. His desire to be heard and recognized will never be satisfied, and this consumes him. Edward reflects on his life and choices, questioning whether what he did was truly his only option. Loneliness becomes even more oppressive in his prison, and he realizes that his quest for control and power has not brought the satisfaction he expected. Instead, he finds himself more isolated than ever, trapped in a cycle of pain and despair. This realization leads him into a new phase of self-reflection. The Riddler, at his core, is a character who seeks truth, even if that truth destroys him. He sees himself as a product of his society, shaped by traumatic experiences and the search for validation. By exploring his disturbed mind, the film not only offers a view of evil, but also a call for understanding. In a world where the line between good and evil is often blurred, the Riddler reminds us that, in some way, we all seek to be heard and recognized. The Riddler in the Batman is a deep representation of human trauma and the consequences of loneliness. His quest for power and recognition is a metaphor for the struggle of many who, like him, long for connection in a world that often ignores their voices. Edward Nashton's story is a modern tragedy, a reminder that behind every villain, there is a story of pain and desperation. The character of the Riddler serves as a mirror, reflecting the failures of society and the internal struggle many face. He is not just a criminal, he is a reflection of the emotional scars that many carry, a manifestation of the pain that can lead to desperate actions. By exploring the Riddler's disturbed mind, the Batman invites us to look beyond the surface and recognize the complexities that lie within each of us. As the lights of Gotham flicker, reflecting the unending battle between hope and desolation, Edward Nashton's story reminds us that the true battles often take place within ourselves. The Riddler, in his quest for recognition, reveals the fragility of the human mind and the cost of abandonment. What does it truly mean to be heard in a world that so often ignores such suffering? If you are moved by this, don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep reflections on the characters who shape our stories. After all, each riddle solved is an opportunity to better understand ourselves.